Welcome to another episode of Software Explorations, Concepts, and Overviews. In today's episode, we are going to get into a little bit of cybersecurity. We're going to be reviewing and investigating what GRC is, right? Governance, risk management, and compliance. This is a new area for me. I've always heard people talking about getting into GRC for cybersecurity, and I never really understood what it was. So I wanted to investigate and explore with you. So what I did was I put a little bit of a presentation together to help me better understand it and to also share with you, and we can learn together like we love to do on software explorations. All right. So thank you for tuning in, and let's get to it. But before we do that, if you have not done so yet, go ahead and like the video, share the video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell so you can know every single time that we go live. And of course, if you need one-on-one coaching and training with me, go ahead to www.techcoachroff.dev, where I can help you level up your technical skills and your career, right? But let's get into the topic of GRC. So let's get into our topic for today: governance, risk management, and compliance, a sector of cybersecurity that a lot of people have been getting into, and I'm just interested to learn more about it. So let's get started. So what will we cover, right? And this is going to be going across a few weeks where we'll cover like different aspects of it. So today we're going to be mainly focused on the introduction, but in totality, we'll have an introduction to GRC, what are the specifics about governance, the specifics about risk management, about compliance, the GRC framework, best practices for GRC, case studies, and an overall conclusion. So let's get into the introduction. So, someone figured out my password. Now we have to rename our dog, right? Because a lot of times we'll name our password, we'll give a password like Fido and then our birthday, right? And now if somebody figures out your password, do you change your password or do you change your dog? We're going to find out. All right, so on today's agenda, right, we're going to get the definition of GRC. We're going to get the importance of GRC, the different components that make up GRC, and a conclusion for today, but not the overall conclusion for our series for the next few weeks, digging into GRC. All right, so what exactly is GRC? All right, so let's just read a general definition that I found for it. It says, governance, risk, and compliance is a structured way to align IT with business goals while managing risk and meeting all industry and government regulations. It includes tools and processes to unify an organization's governance and risk management with its technological innovations and adaptation or adoption. Companies use GRC to achieve organizational goals reliably, remove uncertainty, and meet compliance requirements. And depending on the industry that you're in, there can be a lot more compliance requirements than others. And, that's why you need that governance and that risk management part of it to go all together, right? So, importance in modern organizations. So, the importance of GRC in modern organizations, right? Governance, risk management, and compliance. So, let's go through these one by one, right? So, GRC provides enhanced decision making, right? So it provides a structured framework for decision making processes, ensuring that decisions align with organizational objectives while considering potential risk and compliance requirements. So they all work together. And that's why I believe that they group it GRC, because they all have to be in line to like the company's goals, as well as what risk that it exposes the companies to, which risk is a healthy level of risk, and to make sure that we're in compliance with whatever regulations that is in the industry that we're in, right? So pharmaceutical companies can have a lot more regulations and compliance requirements than somebody who might be in a video streaming industry or something to that extent, right? It just depends on what you're doing. So, that's a risk, like, hey, how can I get this rash in my armpit to go away? So something that we have to figure out sometimes. All right, so risk mitigation. By implementing robust risk management practices within the GRC framework, organizations can identify, assess, and mitigate risk effectively, thereby reducing the likelihood of financial losses, reputational damage, and operational disruptions, right? And to me, that's one of the most important factors. Financial loss can kill you, but the reputational damage is like it can propel the financial loss because we've seen when companies get hit with like cybersecurity attacks, like they get hacked or for whatever reason, and now the damage that the reputation is done usually leads right to financial losses, or if there's operational disruptions or whatever the case may be, whether it's like issues within like management or um, infrastructure issues that they can also lead to financial losses. And once it goes down to financial losses, that's like the nail, the hammer hitting the nail. All right, so regulatory compliance. In an increasingly complex regulatory environment, adherence to laws, regulations, and industry standards is paramount. GRC helps organizations stay compliant with applicable requirements, avoiding costly penalties and legal consequences. All right, and think about it like this, right? So, like I was saying earlier, based on the industry that you're in, there's going to be different regulations that you have to deal with, but also not only the industry, but also the location that your business operates. So, for instance, there might not be some particular regulations in the United States for industry, but in Europe there might be some regulations. So, if you are doing business in Europe, your company has to meet those requirements for Europe as well as for the United States. And then if you extend into other countries, like you might have to adapt. And that's the reason that some companies decide not to do business in other countries because it gets too complex and too expensive to adhere to those regulatory to those regulations. And this right here, this gives you that structure. Like the people in GRC would have to like make sure that the company is aligned and that they are providing that compliance that the company needs to follow wherever they are doing business in. All right, so protection of reputation. Compliance failures, ethical lapses, or risk incidents can severely tarnish a organization's reputation. GRC frameworks help maintain integrity and ethical standards, safeguarding the organization's reputation and fostering trust among stakeholders, right? And think about it like this. It's not only about technology or things like that. Every single business has a reputation to protect, right? So if things aren't on the up and up, and now it leaves a sour taste into the mouth of the business of the customers and the stakeholders, then you have a problem with your reputation. And once that credibility and the reputation starts to go down, we're going to have a lot of issues. So it's not like security. Cybersecurity is like more on technological basis, but security as a whole, your reputation is paramount, and you need to make sure that you are protecting your reputation at all costs. So, optimize resource allocation. By aligning governance practices with risk management and compliance efforts, organizations can allocate resources more efficiently. GRC enables prioritization of initiatives based on their potential impact on organizational objectives and risk exposure. All right. So, they like trying to see where to plug in what resources so that you are not going too far to the left or too far to the right, but like Goldilocks found, you just have to find it just right. Stakeholder confidence. Effective GRC practices demonstrate to stakeholders such as investors, customers, partners, and regulators, those are all stakeholders, that the organization operates within or with integrity, transparency, and accountability. This fosters trust and confidence in the organization's ability to deliver value responsibly, right? So once you keep your stakeholders confident, they're going to give you the world, right? However, it's hard to build up stakeholder confidence, and it is so easy to lose it. So you have to be very careful, walk a thin line to make sure that you are operating correctly. And sometimes usually it's not on purpose. A lot of times it's just like mistakes or incompetence and things like that. But you need to keep your stakeholders' confidence, because once they start losing confidence in you, then they're ready to move to a different direction. So, operational resilience. So GRC helps organizations build resilience by proactively identifying and addressing risks that could disrupt operations. By integrating risk management into business processes, organizations can anticipate and respond to challenges more effectively, ensuring continuity and sustainability, right? So you need to be like risk management helps you get prepared for almost whatever it is that's to come, at a company that I was at previously, being here in South Florida, we are always at risk for hurricanes during the summer, all the way like from June all the way to November. So every year we would have to plan, if there is a hurricane that comes, how are we going to handle that? Like who's going to be in what we had called like it was like kind of like a bunker, so to keep business going, and then who would be going to another state to keep business operations going, and at a previous company, like when I was working in tech support, our building was like a category 5 that could take impact of a category 5, and when we had a hurricane, like we had a massive generator, and there was a crew that was keeping the company going because we were not only providing services to South Florida, we were providing services to the entire world. Any company could use, or anybody could use our hosting services, so we had to make sure that that business was kept running. And there was a few scares there, but it ended up doing well at the end. All right, so strategic alignment. GRC facilitates alignment between organizational goals, risk tolerance, and compliance requirements. This alignment enables organizations to pursue strategic objectives while managing associated risk within acceptable limits and compliance boundaries. All right. Cost reduction. So investing in GRC initiatives can ultimately lead to cost savings by preventing costly incidents. That's a fact. Streamlining processes, and avoiding unnecessary expenditures associated with non-compliance or ineffective risk management. So if you're not in compliance, right, then that can lead to fees and fines and everything like that. If you do not properly assess your risk, now when you have to deal with those risks, that also leads to extra costs and everything like that. So having a good GRC practice in place, that is going to help save money as well as not waste money that could have been avoided. So GRC also provides a competitive advantage. So organizations that effectively manage governance, risk, and compliance gain a competitive edge by demonstrating superior operational efficiency, resilience, and integrity compared to peers. This can attract customers, investors, and talent who prioritize working with responsible and well-governed organizations, right? So that's how you have to stand out. You have to be better than everyone else, right? Like definitely better than those who are in close proximity to you. But in general, you have to be better than everyone else, and that gains you that competitive advantage. And that's why your company will be successful. So let's get into the components of governance, risk management, and compliance. So governance. What is governance, right? Governance is the system of processes, policies, and structures through which an organization is directed, controlled, or managed. So it's pretty much the policies that we follow, how we do things in this company, and how things work. So what are some of the components of governance, right? So there's a board of directors. They're responsible for setting strategic direction, overseeing management, and ensuring accountability, right? Accountability is very much needed always, right? Then there's executive management. They implement the board's directives. They manage the day-to-day operations and ensure alignment with organizational goals. And then we have policies and procedures. So the policies and the procedures, they establish the guidelines for decision-making, conduct, and ethical behavior within the organization, right? So make sure things are on the up and up, and all these components of governance work together to make sure that we are heading in the right direction. So now we get into risk management. So what is risk management? Risk management involves identifying, assessing, and mitigating and monitoring risk that could affect the achievement of organizational objectives, right? So we need to find out what can cause problems and how to handle it if that actually does come up. And that can include from like if someone is trying to steal company information, if there is some type of hack that happens, if people are trying to social engineer their way into getting company information, whatever the case may be, like whatever risk that you can deal with, like I was mentioning earlier, if you are in an area that is affected by certain weather conditions, how do you prepare for that? So many different things that you need to prepare for, and that's what risk management helps you get ready. So let's get dangerous, right? Let's get dangerous. So components of risk management. So we have risk identification, where you identify potential threats, vulnerabilities, and opportunities that may impact the organization. And that's not limited to like cyber attacks or, holes in your code or whatever, anything like that, right? That is like anything. Like I was mentioning about the people aspect of it, the weather conditions, whatever the case may be, that can have negative impact to your organization. In risk management, you need to identify those risks, right? And then risk assessment, evaluating the likelihood of a potential impact of identified risk to prioritize mitigation efforts, right? So based on the risk that you have identified, you assess it to say, okay, you can give it a scale on a scale of 1 to 10. This one is a 1 in the likelihood or severity. This one is a 10 because it like this can happen and we really need to be prepared for this, right? So you are assessing the risk and you are going to be making your decisions based on that. So risk mitigation, implementing controls, strategies, or actions to reduce the likelihood or impact of identified risk, right? So to continue along what we just talked about, now it's okay, what do we put in place to protect us and prevent us from having those risks? So for instance, how do you implement your security, like logging into the system? Maybe, with nowadays where many people are working remotely, how do you working remotely put into place how people connect to the system, right? How long can they be connected for? Are you using two-factor authentication? What is it that you're doing to make sure that information isn't being stolen? And then putting in also policies like, okay, if this was to happen, here are the consequences for that person who, or whatever happens, here are the consequences, right? Sometimes it's termination. Sometimes there might be some type of suspension or penalty. Sometimes it can even lead to criminal prosecution. So you need to so that's what the risk mitigation is like. Okay, how do we what are we putting in place to prevent these the likelihood of these risks happening? Okay, and then we have risk monitoring, continuously monitoring and reviewing risks to ensure that mitigation measures remain effective and responsive to changes. And that can include like what we reviewed a few months ago about the SEAM, like security incident and event management, right? Of what's coming into the infrastructure, what's going out of the infrastructure. I'll tell you this, right? We've been running a few scripts just this past few weeks at work, and I got a message just like 2 days ago where one of the people who are reviewing the logging of what's being happening on the server, they said, "Hey, we noticed that your username is pinging a lot, like about 5 million requests." And like, is this valid or are you running something? Should we add you to the exclusion? I was like, oh yes, like this is what we're actually doing, and it's going to be running like through like for the next few days. And it's okay, cool, we'll take care of that. But they are actively monitoring to make sure that things are accurate and that and there's ways to handle it. But it is very, very important because if no one catches that, it could be something that's happening maliciously, right? And they need to make sure that, okay, this is valid, and that's why it is imperative that we have risk monitoring. So compliance, let's get into compliance, right? Let's talk about compliance. Compliance refers to adherence to laws, regulations, standards. What? Standards? Yes, standards and internal policies relevant to the organization's operations and industry. Like we were talking about earlier, there's going to be industry regulations, like that you need to comply with. There's also going to be like location, right? Based on the countries that you're operating in, maybe even some cities that you're operating in, right? So city, state, country, whatever, So, yep. Pretty much when we're doing all these trainings and stuff like that, we are saying that we're signing off that we know what the compliance is, and we are nodding in compliance that we are going to be following the rules and the regulations set before us. So, what are some components of compliance? So, we have regulatory compliance, ensuring compliance with laws and regulations applicable to the organization's activities, products, and services. Then we have industry standards compliance, right? Adhering to industry-specific standards, certifications, or best practices relevant to the organization's sector. So, and it depends on the industry because, for instance, if you are working for for a company that deals with like government regulations, you might be required to get some type of certification in order to do this. Or let's say you want to be a scrum master. Not that a company would have to require you to become like to be certified as a scrum master, but that's going to be 99% of the case where they would want you to be a certified scrum master, and you just have to do what you have to do to get there. And honestly, it like a lot of times, based on the company that you're in, they'll be willing to help you pay for that as well, right? So then there's internal policies compliance. Following internal policies, code of conduct, and procedures established by the organization to govern its operations and behavior. So, for instance, there might be like policies of like a dress code, right? Or there could be a work from home policy and procedure. There can be like a code of conduct. There's a lot of companies that they restrict relationships, like romantic relationships amongst coworkers or amongst like a superior and the person who reports to that superior, right? So many different internal policies, code of conducts, and procedures that have to be established, and that's why we have to go through training and sign off that we understand and we plan on following those procedures. Right, so let's get into the components of the GRC framework real quick. It says policies and procedures, establishing guidelines and protocols for governance, risk management, and compliance activities. Okay, so that's part of the GRC framework. And then we have risk assessment tools, utilizing methodologies, tools, and techniques to identify, assess, and prioritize risks. Right, so there's going to be different tools out there. There's going to be different software out there that you can use that will help you identify the risks. All right, so let's continue on. So there's compliance management systems, implementing systems and processes to track, monitor, and ensure compliance with applicable laws, regulations, and standards. Then we have reporting mechanisms, establishing mechanisms for reporting, documenting, and communicating governance, risk, and compliance related information. And then we have monitoring and auditing processes, conducting regular monitoring, auditing, and review to assess the effectiveness of GRC practices and controls. And most companies with the monitoring and auditing process, that's why you have like you got to take this course yearly to make sure that you are aware of the information, and then you sign off that Sometimes you have to take a little test. It's a dreaded thing that most people have to do, but it is very necessary. As much as we hate to do it, we need to do it because, hey, if we don't do it, then we put ourselves at risk of being outdated on the information. Two, we put the company at risk for not properly protecting itself against whatever threats might come. All right. So, in conclusion, today we spoke about what is GRC. We had an introduction to GRC, the importance of GRC in modern organizations, and the component of GRC. And if you forgot, which I hope you didn't, GRC stands for governance, risk management, and compliance. So what do we have next? Next up, we are going to dig deeper into the governance aspect. We're going to break it down, get a better understanding. So that is what's to come next on the next episode of Software Explorations. But let's wrap up this one. So thank you for tuning in. Hopefully you found that brief introduction to GRC, governance, risk management, and compliance very, very helpful. I found it very helpful myself because it's interesting that although I wasn't familiar with what GRC meant as like a definition and as a practice, I noticed going through this presentation that I've been using and a part of GRC for my entire time in tech, entire career, from when I first started working in tech support to QA, and for my whole history in QA, right? We like and there's certain security officers who are responsible for making sure that we are in compliance and that we are following company policies and procedures, and they are assessing the risk. They say, okay, what do we need to do? But just because like we don't know we might not be aware of the actual terminology behind it, but we practice it every single day inside of work as well as outside of work. And that's a good practice, right? So I think it's very important that we start to learn more about these cybersecurity terms and see how it relates to our work lives as well as our everyday lives. And that way we can start making better decisions in everything that we do. All right. So Thank you for tuning in. I really appreciate it. If you have not done so yet, go ahead and do me a favor. Like the video, share the video, subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell so you can know every single time we go live, as well as if you need one-on-one coaching, go ahead and check me out at www.techcoachralph.dev, where you can sign up for the Patreon and sign up for exclusive content, as well as one-on-one coaching with yours truly, Tech Coach Ralph. But on that note, we are heading out. Thank you for tuning in, and you guys have a wonderful, wonderful day. And I will see you guys on next week's episode of Software Explorations, where we are going to jump into the governance aspect of it, all right? This is Tech Coach Ralph, and we are out.
If you enjoyed the fascinating information shared in this video and you want more, be sure to hit the subscribe button to Tech Coach Ralph to be notified for new videos.